Hello and welcome to Panzer Painting. Today we are going to paint a Panzerkampfwagen B2F from Warlord Games. Here you got a chart of different materials and paints I have used for this project. We first start by priming the tank with a dark grey color. Let it dry in between the coats and remember to give it a few thin coats rather than one thick one. Use a white color for this and aim for the upper parts as well as the most exposed parts of the tank. We can now start by applying the first color. This will be our shadow color, so we'll apply this to the lower parts as well as in the nooks and crannies. Next, we'll apply our main color. This will be our base color and we are going to highlight on this later. Leave some of the colors from the previous step. Now we can apply the first highlight to the tank. We are going to aim for about half of the horizontal and vertical surfaces. For the final highlight, we are keeping the paint for the very top and most exposed parts of the tank. Now that we are done with the color modulation, we can coat the tank with satin varnish. This will protect the tank later. When it's dry, we can coat the tank with worn effects medium. When the worn effect is dry, we will paint on top of it and then scrape off some of the paint, making it look like the paint is coming off. You can skip this step if you want soft edge camouflage instead, but here I am using some masking putty to achieve hard edge camouflage. After you have applied it where you need it, let it sit for a few minutes. The masking putty will settle, giving you a much better result. Starting with the brown color, we can paint the tank all over again. When it's dry, we can add some white to our mix and then highlight the different areas, just like we did in some of the first step. Just like with the brown color, do the same with a green color, adding white when you are ready to highlight. When you're done with the paint, let it dry for a few minutes before removing the masking putty. But don't wait too long, as in worst case you might peel off some of the paint you didn't intend to. For the next step, you need a toothpick or a needle and some water. Dab your finger or a brush in the water and apply it to the surface you want to work with. The water will activate the worn effect medium, letting you add some wear and tear to the camouflage paint job. But don't go too crazy, and remember to keep it to the places that would see wear and tear during use. We have to coat the tank with a gloss varnish before we can apply the decals. Let the decals soak in some warm water for a few minutes, then leave them on a piece of paper in order to get rid of the water. Apply some decal set to the wanted surface. Add the decal, wipe off any excess decal set, and then apply decal fix. This will soften the decal, making it conform to the extrusions underneath. For edge highlighting, we are going to use a wide flat brush to dry brush all the sharp edges. You can also use a fine brush if it's an area that's hard to get to. Use the side of the brush and let it run along any edge you want highlighted. Next step is wear and tear. This is a two-stage process, and for this we'll use a piece of sponge or a brush. First we'll use a light yellowish color to symbolize the smaller superficial scratches. Simply start by dabbing the sponge in the paint and then remove most of it by dabbing it on a piece of paper. Then apply it to the areas that would see the most wear and tear from daily use. Repeat this process by using a dark color, but remember not to go too heavy. If you're up for it, you can also use a fine brush in order to make some lines along the hull and turret. We can now start to paint the tracks, tools and exhaust. When the metal parts and tracks are done, add some white or use a lighter gray and then highlight them. For the wood, use a brown color like shown and then highlight them as well. The exhaust is quite simple. Just take a piece of sponge, dab it in some paint, remove most of the paint in a piece of paper and then dab it onto the exhaust. Start with a brown color, then red, orange and a little bit of yellow. Now it's time to pin wash the tank. You could use enamel wash straight from the jar, but I find it flows better if you mix it with some thinner. Apply this to all the nooks and crannies and it will make the different details pop a lot more. After about 20 to 30 minutes, the enamel wash is dry enough for us to remove the excess. You can use an old brush or a cotton bud for this job. Just dip it in some enamel thinner, then wipe off most of the thinner in a piece of paper and then clean the tank. You can use an old brush in places you can't reach with the cotton bud. However, be gentle. If you rub the same place too often or too hard, the paint will get ruined. Here we are using two sorts of weathering, prime and rain. Simply add them anywhere you think prime and rain will accumulate over time, then let them dry for about 20 minutes before you start blending. Use a brush and some enamel thinner in order to blend the streaks in a downward motion. Now we have to apply a wet and dry mud. Mix some enamel thinner with dark pigment and apply it with an old brush. When everything is dry, add the lighter pigment till you're happy. Next, use some pigment fixer. That will secure all the pigments to the track. Here I am going for dirty but dry looking tracks. The last step on these tracks is the metal part. Use an old pencil and run it along the protruding parts as well as along the side of the tracks. The Char B1 had metal tracks after all. The final touch to this tank is the oil spills. Just put it where oil would spill or where the crew might have added too much. Last step is our matte varnish. With this specific varnish, I can only recommend that you don't rush it and instead give it very thin coats. If you let it pool anywhere, you will get pale areas. This concludes the third episode of Panzer painting. I hope you enjoyed this painting tutorial for Panzerkampfwagen B-2. It's a great tank for color modulation because of the big flat surfaces. You can of course use these techniques on other camouflaged vehicles. Don't forget to comment, like and subscribe if you enjoyed this painting tutorial. See you next time.